You know what buff means, right? Do you know what it means in gamer lingo? If a character gets a temporary power boost, they were buffed. Or if the developers improve the power qualities of the character in the game, they buffed the character. Am I saying this right? Oh. There's always a risk when you walk into this that the internet's wrong about usage. The opposite of buff, because we're just going to continue down this awkward fest. The opposite of buff is nerf. If your character's been nerfed, they've got detracted points from their power bank. And in our passage today, we're going to see Jesus be really powerful. I want you to take your Bibles and turn to Luke chapter 8. Luke chapter 8, we're going to pick up where we left off, and this identity of Jesus, who he is exactly, has been on Luke's mind as he tells us the story about Christ. And we come into a couple of vignettes here that demonstrate Jesus' deity. Jesus can do some powerful things, right? You believe that? But his deity really here goes on display. So Jesus has done a lot of miracles, and to the point that people say this guy's got to be a prophet. Elijah the prophet did some big things, and so he's got to be a prophet. And now the question becomes, well, is he more than a prophet? And Jesus has already said of John the Baptist, who also was this tremendous character and awaited for the coming of the Messiah, that he is more than a prophet. He was the expected forerunner to the Christ. So all of this is built up to this question of who Jesus is. And, honestly, for most of us, we would far prefer like this dramatic deity from Jesus that we're going to see in this passage to the strategy that Jesus usually takes. And see, the reality for us is that because we know Jesus can do whatever he wants, when we get really pressed and really in a pickle in life, we want Jesus to show up with a whole lot of deity, and we're not really concerned about his strategy. And we get a couple of examples here that tell us that Jesus could show up and just make your money, your marriage, and your life a lot better. He could just say it and it would be done. And yet I've found that Jesus does not use dramatic deity very often. Like, think about it. You're like, Lord Jesus, I follow you. I want to serve you. Will you just fix this kid? Right? Just fix this kid. And you feel like in those moments that you've done everything wrong, that you have no way to move forward, that you don't know how to fix this kid, and you're like, if Jesus, I know you could do anything, just tweak his mind, reach into his brain and squeeze something that needs to be squeezed and fix him. And a lot of parts of our life, our finances, we want to be that way. We get caught up with Jesus' power and we tend to overlook his strategy, but it's a mortal failure on our part. It's a faith-damaging failure on our part to overlook Jesus' strategy. Because when we overlook his strategy, we find ourselves doubting his power and his presence and his concern for us. Because we begin to say, we feed back, we say, Lord, do this. You can do it. Why won't you do it? Do you love me? Do you not care? You could fix it, but you won't fix it. You see, and so we look for his power, we overlook his strategy, and it creates a whole lot of faithlessness on our part. So here's what I want to do today. I want us really to know how Jesus works. You see, we started talking about the secrets that belong to those who are listeners in the kingdom, who really belong to the kingdom. So God's people should know the ways in which Jesus works. You should know that. We should know the map. You know, maps were like a coveted prize in pirate days. And many of the goods that pirates would steal from the British and from the French and all of the seafaring nations in that day were maps. The maps showed trade routes. They showed islands and remote parts with storage and supply depots. And so the maps would often be burned before the pirates could take the ship, because the maps are super important. And folks, I want you to know that you knowing what Jesus is doing matters a whole lot to Jesus. And I bet it matters a lot to you. Most of us, when we get in a press, in a hard spot, we say, "Don't you love me? You can fix this," but you don't. And God's answer back seems to be, "I'm working my plan. You're right where you need to be." You're like, "But I messed up and I broke my life and I don't know how to fix it." And I want you to know, even though you've messed up, broke your life, and you don't know how to fix it, Jesus has you right where you need to be right now. There's a beautiful grace in that. So let's look at our passage. This first expression begins in verse 22. In Luke 8:22, Jesus has just said, "Who belongs to him?" And then one day, he got into a boat with his disciples, and he said to them, let us go across to the other side of the lake." So they set out. And as they sailed, he fell asleep. And a windstorm swept down on the lake, and they were filling with water and were in danger. And they went and woke him, saying, "Master, Master, we are perishing." And he awoke and rebuked the wind and the raging waves, and they ceased, and there was a calm. And he said to them, "Where's your faith?" And they were afraid, and they marveled, saying to one another, "Who then is this, that he commands even winds and water, and they obey him?" Yeah, that's definitely power there, isn't it? In fact, in the ancient mind, there were a couple of things that were off limits to human control, and both of them get mentioned. I'll get there. The winds and the water. Who could control those? Only God could control those. And so they ask this somewhat rhetorical question of who then is this? Because they've accepted, these are his disciples, his inner core is who I take this to be. They've accepted that he's the Christ, but now they're picking up deity identity, things that only deity can do. And so they're afraid, and they marvel at this, and they ask this question. That is the question that Luke presents to us. And then we get into the next vignette, the next really bulk of this story. So they sailed to the country of the Gerasenes or the Gadarenes or whatever you want to call them. It's likely all the same people, depending on how your Bible translates that word, which is opposite Galilee. Now, this means it is on a different bank. They kind of moved south along the coastline, and then they take birth on the land in the east of the Sea of Galilee. This is likely where this is. And when he stepped out on land, there met him a man from the city who had demons. You see that from the city, that's super important, because he's out somewhere where he doesn't belong. He doesn't live there in general. There are people in the hills, right? This isn't one of those guys. He's not an outdoor live off the grid guy. He's a man from the city. He's a guy like me who, if he lost his car, ran out of gas, needed to fend for himself and start a fire, good luck, it ain't happening. Would just lay on the ground and die. I watched a lot of episodes of Survivor Man, but not once have I been able to start my own fire without a whole lot of fuel, right? It would just be the issue. So, honey, if we ever get stranded in a remote section, you could start the fire. Okay, he's a man from the city. He had demons. For a long time he had worn no clothes and had not lived in a house but among the tombs. And when he saw Jesus, he cried out and fell down before him and said with a loud voice, What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, do not torment me. For he, Jesus, had commanded the unclean spirit to come out of the man. Now, my Bible, many of your Bibles will have parentheses right here. If you have a pen or a pencil, just scribble out the parentheses. That communicates something to you as if this is like additional information that he just wanted to throw in. That's not how this is working. This is critical information. For many a time it had seized him. He was kept under guard and bound with chains and shackles, but he would break the bonds and be driven by the demon into the desert. And Jesus then asked him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Legion," for many demons had entered him. And they begged him not to command them to depart into the abyss. Now a large herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside, and they begged him to let them enter these. So he gave them permission. And then the demons came out of the man and entered the pigs, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and drowned. I'm going to read the rest of this passage in a moment, but I want to stop here because I want you to see two things that are going on. Jesus works in subtle ways. Jesus works in subtle ways. We look at this and we see two dramatic events. And so how can it be true that Jesus works in subtle ways? We see Jesus, he rebuked the wind and waves. And number two, he gave them permission. Two big expressions of his power. We have Jesus here, and when he's in the boat, here's what I imagine happened. They set out, they're sailing along. Jesus is physically tired. Think about that, because he's physically about to show his deity. He's physically tired, and he takes a nap. And I imagine that some of the canvas had fallen down. He pulled it over his head. He's laying in the bow of the boat, and he's in the boat with some of these guys who are salty sailors, fishermen. They're used to being on the water, and now this wind, one of the classic Sea of Galilee gales, blows down all of a sudden on the lake, and they are taking on water. Now, I have been on the ocean with some salty sailors, some fishermen before. And I'm pretty sure when we were on that boat that was way too small for the number of guys who were on that boat, that as the guys are standing in the bow getting buffeted around, fishing, still fishing, I'm pretty sure I saw a water spout about 300 yards off of the side of our boat. And so here we are getting dumped all over the place and water blowing in, and one of the guys bailing. I was about to get down there and help him. I was just a tourist on the ride with him. But they weren't scared under that situation with the water spout. So for these guys to be scared, watching water come in, they are in real peril. It's not just that they got a little bit spooked like I would or maybe you would. They're really in trouble. And so I can imagine, because this is what we would do. I mean, nobody wants to die asleep, so they go wake up Jesus, not knowing what he's going to do, and they're like, "Hey, wake up, we're about to die." And by the way, if we're in a boat about to drown and we're all going to die anyway, just let me sleep. It's okay. If that's inevitable. So they go wake him up, they pull the canvas back, and they say, "Jesus, Master, Master, we are perishing." And I know the pictures. Jesus stands in the bow of the boat, and he raises his hands, and he makes some pronouncements. There's not a lot of drama to this. I can just see it in my mind's eye. Jesus just kind of raises his head, looks, and he's like, "Knock it off." And then he says to his guys, "Where's your faith?" And goes back to sleep. That's what I see happening. Not a lot of drama. It's a huge work. They're left to ponder the meaning of Jesus being able to calm the wind and the waves. You see, calming of wind and waves, definitely God mode power. He controls the elements. The healing of the man from legion is God mode ownership of the world. And these demons, when they confront Jesus, Look what they're begging him. They're saying, have you come to torment us? They knew who he is, Jesus, Son of the Most High God. They give him both human title and deity title. And they ask, have you come to torment us? Why? Because I don't think the demons even understood the plan of God at this point. They expect the all-surpassing Christological Messianic age to enter in at this point that would have driven them out and sent them as demonic beings into the abyss. They expect that to happen right now, that Jesus has showed up for that purpose. Jesus in his first appearance did not come in power, but in his second, he certainly will. They were expecting the second. In the first one, it was a subtle engagement. And so when you look at what happened, Legion asks to go into the pigs, and then when he goes into the pigs, they rush him down the steep bank into the lake and drown. Do you know what they're doing here? You know what's going on? They're trying to bamboozle Jesus. They're trying to prevent Jesus from entering their territory. They own this place. Notice who it is that ran up to Jesus. It's not that Jesus was walking along and found this guy along the side of the road, shaking and foaming at the mouth. This guy runs up to the boat as Jesus is getting out. You notice the narrative, right? As Jesus is getting out and is the first to speak, and he shouts about it. He said with a loud voice in verse 28. Jesus, in this process of ordering the spirit out of the man, we're told what this would happen to this guy. So notice his condition. He wore no clothes. He didn't live in a house, lived among the tombs, and they beg Jesus not to torment them. The little parenthetical part in verse 29. Notice what they've done to this man. Many a time it had seized him. They tried, the villagers tried to restrain him. He would break the bonds, and the demons would drive him into the desert. You catch that? They have tormented this man. They begged Jesus not to torment them. Jesus, I want to remind you, even though he works in subtle ways, and this is certainly a subtle way. I mean, why doesn't Jesus just torment those guys? Why doesn't he just cast them into the abyss? He has all the power in the world. Because in his subtlety, God's expression of power through Christ is a strategy in which we will be those who advance the gospel work on while we await for his powerful re-entry, personal, spiritual, physical re-entry into this dominion. Jesus, however, never gets defeated, but he doesn't make a big show. So when we're thinking about the way that Jesus is going to work in our life, here's the deal. Maybe you get dramatically healed. Maybe there's a dramatic financial turnaround. Maybe something big happens. But for the most part, Jesus is working in the subtle, small, and quiet ways of your life. Every moment where you say, today has got to be a new day. I've got to deal with this sin. I've got to work on this relationship. I've got to grow my discipline. Every time you have those thoughts, that is the victorious work of Jesus pushing you forward. We don't decide to get better on our own, but we're prompted by the Spirit of God to grow. Every time I go out into my garage where I've got my little gym, our previous owners had one of those markings as the kids got older, and it's got pretty consistent. It's got like 3 marks. And then nothing. It must have been for a long time, because then it's got one like 6-foot mark way up here. I want you to know, I'm pretty sure that kid did not go 1 inch 1 year, 1 inch 1 year, 1 inch 1 year, 25 inches 1 year. I'm pretty sure that's not how it happened. There's just some forgetfulness that occurred, and they didn't mark it down. And you know what? So it is in our spiritual life. Sometimes the reminiscence that we need to do is how we have moved forward. We need to look back and say, I once was that way. Now God has made me and reformed me in this way. Because Jesus doesn't ever get defeated. Jesus opens victories using the schemes and scams of demons. You hear me? Look at this victory, okay? When, verse 34, the herdsmen saw what had happened, they fled and told it in the city and in the country. In other words, they told everybody they could find as they ran screaming along. The story had to be something like, you know Stanley, the crazy naked guy that lives in the tombs? You guys know Stanley. You remember Stanley, right? Well, some dude come off the sea and cast out the demons, and in the process, the demons got on our pigs and ran them downhill into the lake, and now we don't have any pigs anymore. Would you believe that story? Your worker is out there driving your John Deere tractor, and it's like, this guy came in off the lake in his boat, and now the tractor's gone, ran off into the water. You wouldn't believe that. Where did the pigs go? They're in the water. How did they get there? The demons drove them there. Okay, but people believed these guys. Verse 35, the people came out in droves to see what had happened, and they found Jesus and the man from whom the demons had gone sitting at the feet of Jesus, clothed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. And those who had seen it told them how the demon-possessed man had been healed. And then all the people of the surrounding country of the Gerasenes asked him to depart from them, for they were seized with great fear. This is exactly what the demons were trying to do. This is their scam. Don't torment us, Jesus. Don't torment us. Give us an alternative. Give us a way to stay. Can we go into the pigs? And Jesus, seeming to have been played, gives agreement. Sure, you can go to the pigs. The demons then frighten everybody. Hey, by the way, this is why Jesus doesn't work in big dramatic ways, because our response is nearly always fear and marvel rather than faith and confidence. When you see something big happen, by the way, I don't believe anything that I see on a video anymore or on a picture, right? If I wasn't there, it didn't happen. I'm just kidding. I do believe some things. But increasingly, if it's out of the ordinary and you tell me a story about it or I see a video about it, I'm going to be wondering how much AI created out of that. All right, so they all come out and they beg him not to come in anymore. So Jesus got into the boat, got into the boat and returned. Verse 38, the man from whom the demons had gone begged that he might be with him. But Jesus sent him away, saying, return to your home and declare how much God has done for you. You see, it's a beautiful thing. So there's this great 1987 movie. I don't know if it's great. It's actually really dumb. It's called Raising Arizona. Some of you know this movie? And it uses this trope called the pineapple surprise trope. Leonard Smalls is the bounty hunter. He's trying to get Ed, who has stolen a child. Ed is a dorky, kind of low-level criminal that got involved in kidnapping a baby because they really wanted to have a baby. So anyway, he kidnaps a baby. That's terrible. But he is a mild, resorts to stealing diapers in order to put them on the baby. It's a lot of fun, kids. I know you haven't seen it. Anyway. But Leonard Smalls is the hired gun. He's the bounty hunter, and he's an overkill kind of character. He drives a Harley. He's got these two sawed-off shotguns, and he wears a bandolier of grenades on his vest. And so in the finale scene of this movie, Leonard Smalls finally catches up with Ed, has him in this bear hug. and is just crushing Ed to death. Our little squirrely Nicolas Cage when he was young. That was Ed. And Ed's kind of clamoring at his vest, trying to get away, trying to survive. Leonard Smalls throws him on the ground, pulls his sawed-off shotguns, cocks both hammers, holding the shotguns with single hand. You try that. I mean, that's the kind of man he was. To pull the hammers back simultaneously on two sawed-off double-barrel shotguns. 4 hammers at a time. You don't know how hard that is because you haven't tried it. It's tough. Anyway, so Leonard Smalls is about to finish off Ed, who is writhing on the ground in pain. And Ed kind of props himself up on his back elbow, and he raises his hand, and in his hand, what does he have? He has a grenade pin. Leonard Smalls looks down, sees that one of the grenade pins on his bandolier of grenades is gone, and then reaches for the grenade and boom, blows up. Leonard Smalls is gone. It's a good story, right? It's called the pineapple surprise trope, but here's the deal. The demons are the Leonard Smalls. All right? They have scammed this situation, so they think. They've got the grenade. They have caused the villagers to be terrified of Jesus, and just when it seems that all of this was for naught, Jesus is getting back in the boat, and the man who had been healed is the only one. He's just there at Jesus' feet. Jesus is getting back in the boat, and he says, what else is he going to say? He says, "Can I go with you?" And Jesus says, "No, you need to go and tell everybody what God has done for you." That's very important that Luke points out that God has done something for him. Because that's Luke saying, hey, you know the question that the disciples asked in the boat when they said, "Who then is this who commands winds and waves?" The answer is given right there. What God has done for you. Jesus is God. That's what's being said. And Jesus then, getting back in the boat, there's the pin of the grenades. You see, guys, I want you to know something. It's not about who's holding the grenades. It's about who's holding the pin to those grenades. And when Jesus works, what he does is he pulls the pin on these demons. And he ends up being victorious without a big dramatic fight. That man will then go throughout the whole region and will tell everybody the testimony of the power of Jesus, who is the Christ. He turns his life around. He heals him, and he opens up a victory using the scheme and the scam of the demons. What are the demons going to do now? They don't have pigs to belong in, and they've been cast out of this man, and in some spiritual context, they have to leave the region. The man is now free to do gospel work in that region. Jesus clears him out, leaves him holding the grenade. I want you to know what's happening in most of our lives. It's exactly what the demons try to do as they twist the narrative of our life. We look at our struggle and we say, if Jesus would just show up, he could make all these things better. Why is Jesus tormenting me by not helping me? Does he just stand on the sidelines and not do something? And the demons cry out, "Don't send us away to torment." And yet it's they who are tormenting this man. Do you catch the irony here? They are the tormentors, not Jesus. They say, "Don't send us away from our home." But they've driven this man of the city out into the tombs. They've driven him from his home. They cry for mercy, but they show no mercy. You see, the demonic influence in our life is to turn us to say, God should be working in my life in a certain way, but he's not working in it. And I want you to know, every moment that you begin to feel that way, You are subject to the lies of demons. Doesn't mean you're demon oppressed, but you're subject to their lies. And every moment you turn the corner and you're like, I'm looking for drama from Jesus. Just drop it and help me. So, I want to give us 5 ways. We're going to wrap this up so we don't get too long today. 5 ways we see how Jesus works in this passage. Number 1, we see a life and death matter. Here's the deal. You will not perish before the Lord's plan is complete. You might have to go four-wheeling on a lot of life circumstances, but you're not going to perish before the Lord's plan is complete. Okay? So, they are concerned in the boat. They're in real danger. This is a real problem. They're really taking on real water. It's not spiritualized. It's a real deal. Jesus will often, I don't know, lead you into perilous situations. Yes, He will let you be there. Yes, He will make you walk through them. The prosperity doctrine that's out there, health and wealth, as long as you give to God, is a total bogus situation. It's a pagan doctrine. It's not Christian at all. Doesn't matter if those people who preach it are Christian, they're confused, deceived, or demonically led, but it is not from God. You don't give to get, you don't make a bargain, you don't do a pagan sacrifice in order to get back a pagan prize. The reality is you will not perish before the Lord's plan is complete. I know you feel like you might go crazy sometimes, but even that, you won't go crazy until the Lord lets it happen. Number 2 way we see Jesus work. Jesus is in the business of putting your life in order, not just your spiritual existence. It's not just so that you have more patience, more fortitude, more courage. It's so that your whole life begins to conform in the way you use your money, in the way you treat your spouse, in the way you parent your kids, in the way you relate to your grandparents and everybody else, and the way you do your job. All of that is included. The way you do your schooling. All of that is included in the plan of God for your life, to put all of it in order, to put life in order. Not just the spiritual side of it. Jesus is fixing physical problems. The guy was really tormented and really needed transformation. And Jesus puts his life in order. And you notice, once the demons are cast out, He gives him a new mission. 2 components to a new life being in order. Number 1, there's the moral side, the behavioral side, the way you need to get control of those behaviors. But there's just as important on the other side, the need for a new vision and mission from Christ. Number 3 way that Jesus works. He will drive you to risky occasions where faith in Him anchors you. He will drive you to risky occasions where it's only your faith in Him that will anchor you. You got to have courage, not just knowledge. Got to have courage, not just knowledge, to follow Jesus. Some of us, we're guilty of this. We're looking for a secret knowledge piece. Like, if I just understood that, then I could get these kids to behave. Parents, I want you to know something. A lot of parenting is just about courage. Kids are intimidating. And you know what? If you got more than one, they'll gang up on you. They will. Any of you with multiple kids, you know this is true. Listen, making a marriage work is about more than just knowing your spouse. It's also about having the courage to deal with the situations as they arise. You have to have courage, not just knowledge. And Jesus puts us in risky occasions, not just because we need to share our faith, but because we need to be light in the world in a very dark place. And it takes courage to do that. And so He works through courage as well as through the knowledge that He gives. When I was a kid, like the high dive, we used to have high dives at the swimming pool with way too springy diving boards. Y'all remember those? The high dive when I was 10 was like the mortal fear of every 10-year-old kid. It was so high up there. But you dive off the high dive enough and you start feeling comfortable about jumping off the high dive. And then you get a little bit careless and you belly flop and you feel afraid again. That's how it works. In our life, the Lord will warm us up into the scenarios and situations, but it requires courage to continue to move forward. If you're stuck in your spiritual life, you're probably stuck because of courage, not because of knowledge. You got to have the guts to make the changes that need to happen. Number 4 thing of how we know how Jesus is working. We look around and realize that He makes stories of death and destruction, stories of life and renewal. That's what He's doing. He makes stories of death, stories of life. So I want you to look at the death spot of your life, or spots of your life, or whole of your life, the death spots. And guys, maybe, listen, you're stuck in grief and regret because someone is dead in your life and you can't move past it. The place that Jesus is working is in the stories of death in your life, and He is turning them to stories of life. So if you want to know, what is God doing in my life right now? If you're asking that question, like, where is He working? I want you to know where He's working. He's working in the areas of death and destruction, and He is pulling them away to stories of life and renewal. That's exactly what He does with this demon-possessed man. It's the whole reason He calms the wind and raging waves for the disciples. Their lack of courage needed to be bolstered. They needed to understand that as long as they're with Jesus, His plan is going to prevail. So you look at the stories of death in your life and destruction and broken things, and you know that those are the places where Jesus is going to be working. Number 5 thing, how we see Jesus works. You will often become a minister in the place you once lived with defeat, with the devils of your life. You'll often become a minister there. This is a hard thing for us because the trauma counseling that we get is generally flee and get far, far away from those things. And I'm not jumping into all of that, but what I am saying is that if the Lord has given